good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody who is joining us today for the second episode of Space Spectra Virtual Interviews. Today we are following up on the first event of this whole series. So Space Spectra is a series of virtual interviews which is based on the idea of the spectrum. As you can see, there is a rainbow behind me as a background. So with this kind of interviews, we want to show the students, especially with our audience and young professionals who want to come into the space industry, the entire spectrum of individual personalities, contributions, and careers that you can have if you want to contribute to the space and to the humankind evolution as a whole, because space is completely related to that. So today, the main topic is going to be systems miniaturization and scalable habitats. So basically, we will learn with our distinguished guests that I'll present in a minute, what are the careers and what is the evolution of talents and skills that will be needed and are needed now in the space industry and for the space technology advancement as we're moving towards a miniaturization of systems, as we're moving towards interplanetary settlements and space tourism. So today we have 4 amazing guests coming from different backgrounds with amazing talents in each of these themes that I've just mentioned. So today we have with us Michal. She is a space architect and she's founder at Ziso. She's now in Israel and she will be talking about space settlements and let's say from more of a design point of view, what is the contribution that we can all give to space. On the same level, we have then Xavier de Kestelier. I'm hopefully pronouncing very well your names.
Perfect.
Close to that because they are difficult. Xavier, I met Xavier in London and he had contributed to an exhibition for the Mars Habitats at the Design Museum in London, and his work is amazing. He's the head of innovation at Hassell, and today he will be talking with us about as well how merging design and engineering outlook into the space industry and space settlements. On the other hand of the spectrum, meaning the engineering side, we then have Jane Poynter. She is the founder and co-CEO of Space Perspective. As you can see from her background, basically she's now working more on the space tourism kind of thing, although she has a long experience into the engineering side of the space industry. And then to close this up, we have Peter Wilczynski. Again, it's a difficult name, hopefully I pronounce it well. And Peter is a program executive at NASA headquarters and is mainly devoted to the division for small sats. So miniaturization again of spacecraft and the whole engineering side of it. So with these amazing panels and their amazing projects, I believe we can all start with the theme of the day, and I will start with Michal. The main questions, what we will be learning again today is how we can contribute to space technology advancement coming from different walk of life, coming from different education. So with Michal, the first question that I will address to all of the other panelists is, how did you start and why did you start contributing to the space industry?
Well, thank you first of all for having me and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with these amazing fellow panelists. So for me, it was actually kind of something that I never planned. I've never wanted to be an astronaut and I've never watched sci-fi movies. But a few years back when I decided that I want to have my own architectural studio and that I want to focus on aspects of social and diversity aspects in the architecture, which happened once I understood that our world around us here on Earth may not be really designed for everyone because the identity of the architects in the world right now, and they have been the past 100 years and back, they've been pretty much, sorry guys, but white male, mid-age and up, abled people. Women were not even allowed to study architecture less than 100 years ago. Or yeah, so I think I realized that we have a problem here on Earth, and once I just started to explore that, I realized that it's really, really hard to create change in large infrastructure. And then I stumbled upon a competition that I found online that its objective was to design a settlement on Mars. And I started to think and learn about space, and I was like, oh my God, we have an opportunity to start new, to experiment with a total different set of conditions. And that way, because we have a total different set of conditions, we can really think about how things should be designed new and not be influenced from what we know already that exists here on Earth. And kind of that was my starting point. It was a conceptual competition, nothing that was connected to a major agency or anything like that. But that kind of started the ball rolling for me in my head. And once I started researching about living in space, and I learned that we're at a time right now that the space industry is shifting from old space, which is mainly by governments, to new space, which is, we have a lot of new companies, new tech companies, new privately owned companies, and we're shifting the whole idea of space from surviving to thriving. And this is the moment to actually design for people to live and thrive and flourish in space. And I think it is an amazing tool for me personally to see how we can design with diversity in mind, and not only gender, but cultural diversity. When we put a lot of people in a small space and they come from different backgrounds, every person kind of has different sets of values and things that they're comfortable with. British people really don't like to have people up in their faces, as opposed to Israeli people that are very, they're okay with physical closeness. So every person and every gender and every age has their own kind of set of boundaries that we should really respect in order for us to give them the best lives that they can have. So for me, that was kind of how I got into the industry. And I was always really the odd woman out. I was always surrounded by scientists and engineers. And I was like drawing on the walls, and they were like solving equations. But it kind of attracted attention, and I was lucky enough to get in contact with a lot of amazing people in the industry, and talk to them about diversity in space. And also the space industry right now, unfortunately, is still very male oriented, although it's changing. But right now it's about between 14 to 20% women in the industry right now, and most of which are not in the decision-making roles even. So I think it's very, very relevant. And I also have this fantasy that whatever we solve for space, which is basically the future of Earth, whatever we solve there, people here will not have a chance to say, well, no, we can't change things now. I mean, once we prove that it's working there, then we can bring those solutions back here to Earth and really change things up. So that was kind of my way, and I'm still finding the way. I mean, I'm meeting space architects along the way, none of which are, a lot of them are dealing with materials and with the engineering aspects, and psychology is also a part of it. But right now, I'm still looking for fellow architects that are dealing with diversity and cultural issues. So it's kind of a new thing that me and a few other people around the world are like inventing along the way. I know there are space architects that were involved in the International Space Station and a lot of things like that. But that's what I see is I like to dream and to think about the vision and to think about the social aspects. And I know that we have amazing, amazing, amazing people that can solve and make those things a reality. So that's my main focus. And yeah, I'm still finding my way.
You know, that's amazing, because you hit lots of interesting points. So the first one was the shift that we are seeing, and now that Peter is actually coming from an agency, from NASA. So I'll probably go straight to him, because when you're talking about the shift that is happening between the old space and the new space, I am myself part of the old space, if we can talk about, because I work at Airbus Defence and Space, which is coming from a defense background, and it's a big corporation. And so I understand how there is the new ways in which we are contributing between the agencies, between the new startups, between the small companies, and how each of them, there isn't anymore that kind of, let's say, there shouldn't be, or at least there shouldn't be, the divide between I can only work for space if I am at NASA, or if I am at the European Space Agency, or if I am in one of those big corporations. And basically now I can come to you, Peter, because I would basically pick up from what Michal has said, and from also what has been your, why did you start contributing to the space industry from the very beginning when you started your journey, and how do you see with the evolution of exactly what Michal has said, the shift between the old space and the new space, many companies now thriving in a way that wasn't possible not even 10 years ago, let alone 50 years ago, and how do you see the evolution in 50 years from now, in 10 years from now? Because the way I see it is very quick. And the way I see the new companies rising and the agencies and whole company of space working together, is really creating lots of new careers that are meant to be merged in different ways that we didn't even think before. So I'll let you elaborate on this one.
So thank you, Bianca. Thank you again for the invitation to be on your panel. And yes, I represent the old white guys, males in this industry. So yes, I'm the demographic that we should change. So congratulations. And all kidding aside, by holding these venues, allowing for the conversation between the old heads of the industry with people that are inspired, young people, diversity included, to learn about what it takes to be in this industry. As you firsthand have knowledge working for a large aerospace company, things come with institutional biases, cultures, and everything else, and it's hard. The industry is still hard, and the industry's strength is based on diversity. And NASA happens to be an agency that really believes that. I literally just about an hour ago got done with a continued diversity training that we go through just to remind us that even as we sit in our homes or in my kitchen, it is important that we grow the industry in that way. So you asked the question about how did the journey begin. I began on the aero side of aerospace as an aviator early in my teens, flying small airplanes, and then subsequently flying in the United States Air Force. But thereafter, I was very fortunate to have an opportunity to work as a uniformed military member on a military space shuttle mission. And my eyes became this opened to the fascination of all that it takes to get into space. And from a human aspect, as well as putting experiments and payloads and things like that. In the early 90s, it was my entree into the aerospace part of the business, and I have not turned back. And so 30 years later, here I am. Yes, I do work for that behemoth agency called NASA in Washington, D.C. At our headquarters, and it is a giant agency. And it as a giant agency or a huge company, we don't move as quickly as smaller, more agile companies do. But people institute change, and so this is the conversation we're having today. How do we inspire each other, and what do we learn out of this? So one of the innovative things that draws me to work at NASA is the fact that everything that NASA and the aerospace business does, it actually builds on itself, right? let's look at small satellites and small rockets, and the whole rocket industry in the last 10 years has been turned upside down through innovation. People all over the world have done remarkable things in changing how we think about getting access to space, whether it's SpaceX or Avio through Arianespace. I mean, in the last year, both those companies had taught us in the industry that you can launch 50, 60, 120 little payloads and get them into space at an economical price. In fact, Avio did it just last week, correct? With a brilliant launch of 50 some odd satellites from French Guiana. That's really changed the institutional thinking about how to approach. So innovation is based on making changes before we have to, right? Before we're forced either by regulation or by a compulsory activity. It is letting us think about doing things differently. And so when we look at these small sats, and that's really where I'm most interested in, is the innovation that it will take to build these little components, these little satellites, and put them into the far reaches of our solar system and our planetary solar system, the sun. How do we do that? How do we build redundancy, reliability, availability? How do we establish those communications and keep it in a component that's this big, under 100 kilos, under 200 kilos? How do we do that? That's where our innovation task is ahead. And so there's brilliant engineers such as yourself and many others that are on the phone today and on this webinar that are helping us get to that. And again, it's the innovation to do not something we're forced to do, but because we want to do. We want to figure out how to make a material or create a redundancy in a software chip that I don't have to have 5 different strings of redundancy to have one communication line on the satellite. How do I get one with the same reliability? How do I change the communications path? These are all the types of things that inspire me to come to work, inspire me to talk with all of you when I'm kindly invited. And I think this is what can be transitioned from the older generation of employees in this business to transition to the rest of you so that you can take the ball and take off with it and bring on those next new innovations and that change the industry again.
And thank you, Peter, for the great, compound of knowledge about the small. So it was just beautiful to see the story of how we've gone smaller and smaller and smaller. Yet the smaller we go, the more we need innovation, the more we need people who understand and who look at the problem from a different perspective. And I'm mentioning perspective now on purpose because now I'm moving to Jane, actually. So when we are talking about innovation, when we are talking about finding solutions or ways to contribute to a problem in a different way, from an innovative way. So when we talk about innovation, it's just not about a technical innovation. It's about really to look at problems from a different angle. And looking at things from a different angle means, as Michal was also saying, if we are talking about inclusion, we have to look at it from a social and cultural perspective as well. That's not only technical. When we are talking about making space or projects more affordable and open to many other people that possibly weren't coming into the industry. Again, it's just not about the technical issues, about the regulations, about the institutions. It's about the law that allow those people that don't have, for instance, European or American citizenship to work on a project, because this is still a problem for some. I've been working with many of my colleagues who, just because they were coming from the Middle East or from Russia, they couldn't actually working with me on the same project, although we were sitting next to each other. So there are many different ways that we have to look at innovation and inclusion so that the projects are becoming, especially in the space, and careers are becoming more approachable and accessible. So I will go now to Jane. Jane, as just an amazing company. She's running an amazing project, and now the word to you is pretty much the same. So how did you get to jump onto a way of contributing to space, which is now let's say, labeled as new space, although you had a journey that was coming probably from different ways of looking at it and looking at the problems that are part of the space industry.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, evening. So I've been very lucky to have a rather unusual path. I think the journey to where I am today with Space Perspective starts really with Biosphere 2, where I was very lucky to get involved in the training program, in being part of the design team, and then to be part of the initial crew to live inside Biosphere 2. And Biosphere 2 was the very first attempt at creating a human-made biosphere, and the idea was that that would then become a prototype space base for the future, but also could serve as a laboratory for understanding more about life on Earth. So right from the beginning of my career, I was tying together these two ideas of space and Earth being inextricably linked. And that space exploration is as much about going to space as it is about understanding and learning about our own planet. And so after the biosphere, one of the experiences that I should step back a second and say that one of the experiences that I had in the biosphere at a personal level was really life-changing. And it was the experience of really being embedded in my biosphere, being absolutely viscerally a part of my biosphere. So on a day-to-day basis, I knew very well exactly where my oxygen was coming from. It was coming from all the plants around me. I knew that as I exhaled, my CO2 was going into the plants to create the food that I was going to eat. Then we ate so many sweet potatoes that we became orange, and so we were visibly becoming part sweet potato. So it was this incredible interlink with our biosphere. Well, it turns out that sort of what you get out of that experience is sort of understanding the totality and how finite the biosphere is, and it's very akin to the experience that astronauts have. And the experience that astronauts have is, they will talk incredibly poignantly about this experience of seeing Earth in space, and the thin blue line, and really coming to this understanding that we all live on spaceship Earth together as one human family. And that was very much my experience in Biosphere 2. So that really set me on a trajectory of how do we make space accessible to everyone? I think we still today, Michal, you mentioned going from survive to thrive. I think today we still tend to think of space as for the few, the well-trained, et cetera, the right stuff, particularly when you're thinking about going to Mars or somewhere. And certainly initially going to Mars is going to be about that initially. But what I'm particularly interested is really making it so much more accessible to so many more people for a number of reasons. One is that it really allows people to have this experience of seeing Earth in space, which has been so transformational for so many, and bringing that back to Earth and using that themselves in how they comport their lives. But also because it brings more and more people into this sort of space family, and really opens up the sort of the umbrella of people that want to make space a reality. And when we go out to space, I have like every hope and expectation that it will actually have tremendous positive impact on how we think about life on Earth.
Thank you, Jane, for sharing your story, because it was emotional. When you were saying I was embedded, I was part of it. This is something that probably we forget. again, we look at the space industry as something that is just technical and is something that is away from us. And to be completely honest, it's something that I've felt myself in a way where when I was myself a student of engineering, aerospace engineering, there was a way where probably, you know, we were kind of narrowed down to how we were meant to work, how we were meant to see at things, how we were meant to solve problems, especially when you were a woman and you are in a minority, let's say. So it felt like I couldn't really talk this way about the space industry because that was far from the equations that I was studying. Although there is actually no gap between the way, what we study and how we contribute to the space, because even those equations are part of the bigger systems. Everything is just us in a way. Earth and space are not disconnected as much as personality and job and contribution and gender or whatever, they are not disconnected at all. It's all together. It's just difficult for many students, many young professionals to understand how they can possibly get to the top, to that job, to that thing, just because they don't see representation. So this is really the hardest part, and I loved your story. And moving on to that one, moving on to the emotional, let's say, part of it, when I was at the Design Museum in London and I met Xavier, there was an amazing panel where they were actually taking into account a lot of the emotions of the human factor of the astronauts, and how obviously the entire spacecraft for an astronaut, if it was designed by an engineer, would have just been a box. But because designers thought it was good to have a window, they included the human factor. So I would move to Xavier. And again, thank you very much for being with us. And it was a great pleasure to meet you in London a couple of months before the whole COVID started. And so my question to you is pretty much the same. So you were coming from, let's say, more of a design background, but you've come into the space industry or into the space projects pretty much, probably very similar to Michal, because you've been working on Mars settlements. So I would love to hear you sharing your story and how you came into the contribution for space and how you were still going on, and how you see people that are not engineers strictly or scientists, or they don't fit into the box of who should work for space. How do you see them contributing to a mission for space as much as you've done?
Yeah, sure. Hey, thank you all for having me today. It's really good. Yeah, how did I get into all this? How did it all start? So I did not set off my career to become a space architect. I actually still don't call myself a space architect. I just call myself an architect as I can. But I did actually kind of become an architect through space in a funny way. And it all started, I think I was about 12 years old or something, like 12 or 13. And my dad took me to a space exhibition in Brussels. This was kind of the end of the Cold War, I think. And it was a huge exhibition. And a lot of the agencies were sending stuff to this exhibition. And there was one piece that just blew me away. And that was the training module for Mir. So the Russians actually sent a full Mir module to the exhibition, and as a visitor, you could just go in, touch the buttons, sit in it, touch everything. Like it just blew my mind, because suddenly I thought this wasn't possible to actually be in that actual space that was also up. You know, the actual station was at that moment flying around Earth. So it just blew my mind. I came home. The first thing I did was I took A3 drawing boards from my sister, who was studying geography back then, and I stole her rapidographs, and I started to draw space stations, right? And what I didn't draw science fiction space stations, but I tried to draw real ones, how they would really be and how people would live in them. And I also didn't do like mass perspectives. No, I did like actual sections of space stations, really detailed. And I would like to say that was actually my first architectural drawing I did, probably. I never thought I could, actually design space stations or space habitats back then. But weirdly enough, I did become an architect, right? And I didn't really think about space that much for a long time. I was always quite a big fan of space. I loved sci-fi and loved, I followed it, but I never thought I could get a job in it or work in it until many years later. I started to get really interested in 3D printing, and I was kind of interested in technology and architecture. And at the practice I was in back then, I was implementing 3D printing. I was doing research on large-scale 3D printing. And at some point, I found a guy in Italy called Enrico Dini who was doing large-scale 3D printing. I was really fascinated by it. At that time, European Space Agency got fascinated by his process as well. And they wrote out a research project, a tender, looking at what the applications could be for large-scale 3D printing. And Enrico called me and I said, do you want to join this? I'm not a designer, but I know how to print. So let's join up. And I think the European Space Agency was actually only interested in the pure technical side of it, of, could you 3D print and what would you print? A wall, a roof, like a landing pad, what would you print? And as architects, we can't stop designing, of course. So we kind of designed the beginning of a space habitat, of a 3D printed space habitat on the moon. And we made some great visuals about that. And suddenly these renderings were like, they weren't really in the requirements, in the brief of the research, but we did them anyway, because how can we explain something without visualizing it, right? And that kind of took off, and it kind of took off from there, I would say. And I found myself in an interesting, as a designer in space, because it's such a very kind of engineering heavy field. There's very few designers in there. And often we are seen as the ones that are just gonna, I don't know, pick the color or make the door, the handles or something like that, I think. But I truly believe that we have a very central role to play in this whole field, right? And I'll try to explain how. Like, when I started the moon habitat and now I'm doing the Mars habitat, I took a very conscious position, right? The conscious position is that as a designer, the good thing what you're at is that you're not a specialist in anything, right? We're not specialists in anything. We almost don't know nothing. What we're really good at is actually putting loads of other bits of technology somehow together. We're really good at being the master of ceremonies, to being the conductor and somehow bring everybody together. Because that's what we do with buildings. Buildings, you get engineering, everything comes together in a building. And I feel it's the same thing in space. So instead of focusing on a very particular problem, what engineers are extremely good at, right? I did not do that. But what I also did not do was become the artist. You see that in space a lot. You see the artist impression, right? Which is often something that is very distant of the reality. So you have the artist impression on one side, which is a very kind of thing that happens in space. I see it a lot. Or you have the actual proper engineering and science. And I thought, I'm going to stay in the middle, right? I'm going to stay in the middle and are able to kind of somehow not just do an artist impression, don't go completely into detail. I'm comfortable only knowing a little bit, but somehow coming with an overall vision that is kind of 80% there. And I'm comfortable by not having to solve everything, because that's where engineers are for, right? And I think that's that position that I'm trying to stay in, right? I think it's really important. And then bringing in, as you said, I've worked on our Mars habitat. I've worked with really engineering people and scientists, but we also brought in anthropologists, space anthropologists. I brought in a fashion designer. I brought in a furniture designer. So to bring all these people together, that I think where is the most exciting thing is, and that's where I feel very comfortable, you know, in working in that field. So yeah, I believe, and to finish off, I probably do a little anecdote is about the first designer in space was Raymond Loewy on Skylab, because what he did. It's weird. To hear me? Yeah. Hang on.
Mhm.
Hang on. Yeah. Raymond Loewy, first designer in space at Skylab. When he was brought in, engineers at NASA were looking a bit funny because they were thinking, well, what is this dude going to do? Is he going to choose the color? He did choose the color, by the way. But what he also did, he did three things. He made a personal space for the astronauts, which wasn't designed in there before. He did B, he designed a little table for the astronauts to have dinner together, to have a meal together. Originally, the engineers just had a little flappy thing from the sides. They weren't even, the astronauts weren't facing each other having a meal, you know? And the third thing, which I still find astonishing, he put in a window. There was no window, and he fought extremely hard to actually be able to put a window so the astronauts could look out onto the Earth. Because original design, it wasn't in there because, and I understand it completely from the engineer perspective, it was a risk factor. It was an extra complication. And I totally understand it from an engineer perspective. But can you imagine being for weeks or months in Skylab and not looking back at Earth? You know, going back to Jane's point, not having that view back, that would be unbelievable, right? So yeah, I think designers have a real central point in space development, more central than we often think.
Thank you, Xavier. Yeah, it's very, very important. You shared the entire journey, and especially the role that many people can have when they join up together. And I saw Michal nodding a lot at what you were saying. Because it's I remember once there was, you know, this funny story. So she shared something on Instagram, and there was something that was very similar about, you know, the rocket scientist, how a rocket scientist will think, and how actually, you know, the architect will help that rocket scientist going through that thinking. And then I corrected her. I said, well, maybe a male rocket scientist will think, because I felt offended as a rocket scientist. It was an offense. It was saying, actually, you know, what she had shared on a way that the whole design of that spacecraft or that environment for space was created. Actually, it's interesting that even for myself, coming from a very engineering, rocket science background, I had seen, because as a woman, I would have done the same. So now my question to Michal again is, how do you see the role that all this, the diversity of, you know, irrespective again of gender, but also, you know, there were latest statements about finally we can have a toilet where astronauts, there is a unisex toilet on the ISS or on the spacecraft. It's something that no one had ever thought before, because not many women would be astronauts. Now it's something that is becoming to be thought. So when you were talking about diversity and inclusion in the design, so how would you see the whole spectrum of humanity coming together and contributing, especially when we are talking about disabled people, when we are talking about people that maybe have, maybe don't see or can't talk, or all these different other perspectives that we don't really think about it, because, you know, we are not into their shoes. So when we think from an engineering perspective, from a design perspective, again, we think just probably one way. So how do you see the evolution of the design for spacecraft for astronauts and settlements, and how do you see new talents needed to come in into this whole new world, this whole new universe that is opening up for us, humanity, to contribute to. And again, it's not all about design, but also about, you know, thinking from a different way. It's, again, we are not talking even anymore about just male, white, the white supremacy. We are thinking about many things. We are talking even about women having periods when they are astronauts. So how do we integrate all of this? And how do you help the younger ones, the youngsters that want to come in to actually contribute in very different and unique ways to our new world into space?
Well, that's a complex question. I have, my answer is divided into two or maybe three parts. First of all, I didn't say my background, my professional background is large-scale projects in architecture. I design skyscrapers and large urban projects. And before that, before becoming an architect, I was actually serving in the Israeli military in the intelligence unit, where I first touched on satellites for intelligence purposes. But that was the first time I learned about space and what can we do and how satellites help us. So those two things that I have in my background kind of led me to where I am now. And the reason why I got involved into skyscrapers and large scale projects is because I really love solving puzzles. And as Xavier said, the architect's job is kind of to touch on a lot of different aspects in the project, and especially in large scale projects. And I look at any space project as a large scale project, even if it's a small habitat. There's so many things involved in it. So my first answer for your question is that I think everyone should look at what they know, what they're good at, what's their own background, instead of kind of looking at a list of potential jobs in the space industry. Look at what you can do and how you kind of convert that or take your capabilities, your special, unique capabilities, and how you contribute into the space industry. I think that's a good way to look at it. I think if I now would want to do something that is different than architecture and the architectural world in the space industry, maybe I'll have a harder time. And what I do more specifically, the whole thing with diversity, is because that's something I'm very, very passionate about. And I think that's always a good combination, to take what you're good at, to take what you're passionate about, put them together, and then you can kind of form your own niche in wherever you're doing. The second part of your question is, in large scale projects, usually we have something that is called public consultation. So we kind of, if we have a new building, a new tower in the city, we get all the people in the neighborhood, tell them, let them know about the project and get their feedback. Now, if we're talking about space, how will we get the feedback of the people if the people don't really even know that this thing is not sci-fi and it's actually happening? So I think it's something that we really have to do, and really have to do right now, because those types of projects take a long time to design and build. Like one single skyscraper can take from 5 to 10 years, depends where you are in the world, to design and build. So imagine how long it takes to create something in space. So I think it's something that we should all start to think about, because if space is for everyone, everyone should be involved and everyone should be consulted with, especially because we really can't walk in all of the people's shoes. We don't know other people's personal needs and personal experience. And the last thing I want to touch on is that you mentioned people with disabilities. I think that recently, in the past few months, I've been researching a lot about how disabilities on Earth can become superpowers in space. So there are many, many things that are perceived as disabilities here on Earth. I mean, a person who uses a wheelchair technically has a disability in mobility because the surrounding does not fit their needs. But technically, if it would everywhere, it wouldn't be seen as a disability. So maybe a lot of things that people have or don't have here on Earth can become something very, very useful in space. Maybe people that lost their vision maybe could be very helpful, because the radiation in space can really impair vision, and people that are already used to not relying on their sight can be helpful in some way. There are people that have amazing memories and they're like on the spectrum of autism that can be used. There are people that there are Paralympic athletes. Like in the ISS, people, they use their hands to move around. They don't really use their legs. So technically thinking, they can be amazing astronauts. So I think everyone kind of can find their way and their place in space, not only because they should be a part of it, because it is for everyone, but also those different unique abilities and unique capabilities that people have can really contribute in an innovative way. And my tip, or my what I would suggest for people, is really to see what is their own passion and how does it translate. Because as we're moving towards more privatized industry, I think there's a very, very big spectrum of jobs that we would see being needed. Even if we just take architecture and engineering, that's a whole big spectrum. Even set design for movies that are now starting to talk about filming movies on the ISS. I mean, that's also another big thing about how you create a set with microgravity with limited amount of crew members. So there's so many things that can be involved there. And I think really the core thing is to think about what you are really, really good at and start from there.
Thank you, Michal. That was great, and it is very true. The more we are being more conscious about the fact that space is part of the Earth and vice versa. So we all live in space. So thinking that our business on Earth is disconnected from space, it's very difficult, and it is erroneous thinking that everyone here doesn't have a business in the space as well. And but obviously, as much as we can say space is for everyone and everybody can give a contribution, there are still some limitations, and we have to be very conscious about them. So now, going to Peter, for example, when you had a very long experience in NASA, how did you see evolving, let's say, the approachability of NASA and NASA projects to people that, for instance, don't have an American citizenship? This is a question that I get a lot. I would love to work for NASA or for NASA projects, but still, because I am Brazilian or I am from another place, I can't really work for that kind of specific role. I can't really get my paperwork around. Did you see an evolution at NASA as a one of the main big agencies in space towards this, this paperwork, these procedures? How can we somehow allow an access to people and their main contributions as a job, as a role, as a project or a project manager to NASA projects? And what are the limitations that we still have to take into account?
So it's a really good question, and I think that dealing with big institutions, government or otherwise, there's undeniable amount of paperwork, much of it related to safety, much related to the personal well-being of the employees and future employees. I think there's a lot of ways that can improve. Clearly, a huge institution such as NASA can clearly improve every day on how we attract the kind of diverse talent that is out there, that to share what we share, the excitement and the twinkle in everybody's eyes that are speaking today. You can see that there is a glow in our conversation about this topic and how it does excite us. And I think that's also how we continue to attract the future generations, because one of the things, if you recall, in the 1960s, when NASA became NASA, and they decided with President Kennedy's leadership that they were going to go to the moon. Going to the moon during the time of a very unpopular conflict in Vietnam was a challenge, and it was a challenge for the American public. And NASA set out to do was to connect the dots between what we were going to do in terms of achievement to the moon and how that relates to us on Earth. And this has driven NASA for decades to go out and to let everybody understand, why do we explore? Why do we have a space station? What does it mean to you? And the definition of this in a joking way has always been, if you can't go down to the street corner at Starbucks and explain it to anybody in the room, then we're not doing our job. And it's really true, because we can do the most fascinating architecting, designing, science, engineering, rocketry, all of that. If we cannot explain the benefit to our human colleagues, the human benefit, then we're not doing ourselves justice, because our work is for the entirety of humanity, and that's how you get the entirety of humanity to come join us. Everybody from all walks of life, from all countries are participants, and that's what would in fact make us stronger. We have a long way to go. NASA has a long way to go. ESA has a long way to go. All the institutional space agencies still have a long way to go to do this. And we start by having this conversation in a very candid way, to talk about, I know in this period around the globe, this is a very big topic at the moment, and it should be, and it's well overdue. But that being said, it's now time for us to do things about this. And awareness guides our actions. And that's what we need to be. And that's forums like this and many others are beneficial in that way. So I don't have a perfect answer to your question, but I think as we continue to do this and draw people into what we do, and why do we do it? Why, Bianca, why does it drive you to get up in the morning and host a session like this? Why do you do this? Why do I see you all over the internet and all over LinkedIn and all over Twitter and everywhere else? You are passionate about this. And how do we get that passion instilled? We show them what the benefit is. We explain it in our own words with uncomplicated terms, without science or engineering terms. We explain it to them why it's important. And we start that process.
Yeah, it's true. I know it was a difficult question because, I kind of needed your help, because these are all the questions that I get on a daily basis, mainly from students. And it is true that we can have a passion, but then at the same time, when we cannot get the job, it becomes very complicated, and especially in situations like this ones. And having, people from any different of background, from different places that have made it into the industry at excellent level, coming from, again, very different backgrounds, it's first of all inspirational to me, it's inspirational to everybody, but also helps them understand that as much as we can have a passion, it wasn't easy for us in the first place anyway. And it's not really easy, because educating people about why space is important, it's still quite complicated. There is still a lot of resistance. And I was saying, Jane also nodding about many things, and I'm moving on to you now, because given what you've experienced yourself and why you basically decided to find Space Perspective. One of the other questions that I get a lot is many students wanting to applying for jobs. They apply for, again, NASA, ESA, Airbus, Boeing, all the bigger corporations. And anytime they come back to me and they ask me, I got rejected, the process was too long, I didn't get my internship, I didn't do that. Then I ask them if they actually applied for other companies, like smaller companies, startups. And many people don't know that they exist. Many students don't know that the new space is rising so much. So actually the opportunities for working for companies that are not as big as Airbus or Boeing gives them the same or even better opportunities to contribute to a big project. So now that you've had a very unique path, so why do you think that companies probably like yours or like many others that are not the big ones don't have visibility? And how do you think we can change this approach so that people also understand where and how applying for a job that doesn't necessarily mean NASA or ESA or any other space agency?
Yeah, so I think when we think about space and having careers in space, I do think we tend to think, we as an industry tend to think pretty linearly, like, you know, you got to be an engineer or, you know, something like that. And all of that is true, right? All of that is true. We need engineers, and we certainly need a greater diversity in our engineering pipeline. Yay, please. But also, there's a huge array of other needs in the industry. You know, I think one of the things that goes back to a little bit what you were talking about, Peter, is storytelling. We desperately need great storytelling. We desperately need people who understand how to put the human experience at the center of design. You know, I mean, all of these things are very, not the kind of things we normally think about, and are all the kinds of things that new space companies are beginning to incorporate. You know, artists, there are a lot of artists in residence programs now. That are involved in some of these new space companies. So, you know, you can really throw the general concept of career out the window and think afresh when it comes to thinking about new space, but it requires being entrepreneurial. It's not going to be handed to you. You got to go looking for it. You got to go hustle a little bit. You're going to have to get in on the ground floor and sweep the floors sometimes, right? It's not going to be a linear path either. My path has not been linear at all. You sometimes have to take leaps of faith, right? And don't necessarily know that it's going to, you know, give you a stair step to a very particular outcome in 5 years, 10 years. I've never understood career path development like that. I cannot think about career development in what am I going to be in 5 years? That's not going to get you there. What's going to get you there is to really, you know, as everybody here has really said, is like what are you passionate about? What can you do? And then go find opportunities to go and provide value. And that will move you forward. I think that's incredibly important.
I absolutely love what you said, and I couldn't agree more, because again, we try to encourage boys, women, anybody to get into STEM careers and space, but we never explain them why they should do that in the first place. And sometimes it's not even an explanation. It's not because we need a tick in a box. Okay, now we have 50-50 gender parity and we are all okay and we can go and sleep and we are fine. That's not actually it. It's why do you want to contribute to that project and to what kind of degree? For instance, even talking about engineering and architecture. So I am an aerospace engineer, and even in the aerospace engineering, there are plenty of things that you could be doing. I could have been doing so many different things. I decided to be a fluid dynamic and thermal engineering just because I liked aerodynamics. And that was something that nobody really explained it to me. I could work into space. I wanted to be a Formula One engineer. I had no idea working for space. And then I realized, well, actually fluid dynamics actually applies to re-entry capsules. And I watched all these things. I said, oh, I could work for space. I had no idea. And this is how it all started. So nobody was telling me you work into space or you do STEM because we need more women. I would have just walked away if somebody would have told that to me. And this is, again, probably the message that we need to send, and we are all sending. If you really love what you do and you think that the contribution, that the value that you are adding as a fashion designer, as an artist, as a storyteller, as a manager, as whatever, they are all needed in space as much as they are needed on Earth for any kind of projects. Michal has said it beautifully. When you are working on buildings, it's not just about the project of the building, it's about many things. Xavier said exactly the same thing. When they brought a designer at NASA and they thought he was going to choose colors like decoration, actually made something that's been epic. You know, thanks to that designer, now there is the overview effect. And there are stories about the overview effect and the human factor of it. So it's so true that we should stop this limitation of having the career path. And I'm going to do that because in 5 years, I'm going to be the manager, or in 10 years, I'm going to be whatever. If you want to be a CEO, well, and if you want to be a CEO at 20 years old, then you can do it. It's fine if you want to have your own project and you want to be your own boss. Just do it, because if that's what makes you awake every day and working, you know, on your project for the rest of your life, you should do that if that's the contribution that you want to give. And now, before moving on to the Q&A session, I want to go back to Xavier, so that we are closing the loop. And based on what Jane has said too, so you started, again, your story was amazing about you started and how you also didn't have an idea of working for space, and then you started working there. What would you, let's say, what would you share with people and with the students, with our audience today, that nobody has ever shared with you when you were younger, and you hoped you knew that thing, so that you knew what were your next steps?
Gosh. So say it again, something that I wish
there was anything that you wanted to be recommended before you started drawing your spacecraft, and nobody had told that to you, something that would have given you a shortcut, let's say. What would you tell to our students today?
I would say, and I think who said it? Was it Michal? You said it maybe. I think just try to be, you know, try to be good at what you're passionate about, right? I didn't set up a career to become a space architect, right? I would almost recommend people who want to become a space architect, don't do a space architecture course, right? Don't do that. Just become a good architect, right? Just become really good in design, because it's a really interesting career path. And I think I'll tell you something. I'm actually a failed engineer. I'm kind of proud of that fact. I actually did the first year of engineering, which I massively failed. I absolutely massively failed and I kind of realized, because it just wasn't me. The creativity, especially in the first year of engineering, there's very, very little creativity in there. I was so missing that. But I actually approach architecture from actually quite a technical and an engineering style perspective, right? So I would say you just have to do what you yourself are passionate about. The courses might not even be out there. There might not be a course for it. It doesn't matter, right? Just go with your gut feeling. And I was even told what I wish somebody, not what somebody told me, but what somebody didn't tell me, what somebody told me, is my teachers back in high school told me, "Oh, Xavier, you're really good at maths and physics and all that. You need to become an engineer. That's the only career for you. That's what you need to do." But and then I did engineering, and I just was like, "No, this is not me. It's really not me." And so I wish they didn't tell me I need to become an engineer. And I love engineering in a way, in a really funny way. I love working with engineers. It's super exciting always, but I love the combination of it, right? And I think, you know, I approach architecture in a very engineering way always, but also bring everything else into it. So maybe, I don't know if that answered the question or not.
Well, I know it was a controversial question, but I think you've answered very well. And I also remember when you were at school and teachers tell you something because they see, some of your talents. They always told me, "Oh, you are so good at humanities, you should become a diplomat." Then I became an engineer. So it's the other way around. It's like, yeah, sure, I like that, but I like the other.
What you want to do in life, right?
It's very interesting. So thank you very much for having shared your stories and your perspectives. So now I'm going to open the floor to the Q&A session. We have already lots of questions. Some of them are really, really interesting, but I would encourage the audience to come live and ask the questions. So there are some of the questions that are already addressed to Jane and Xavier. So I see here James Mason, who has a question for Xavier. James, would you like to come on the screen and ask that question to Xavier? Let's see if the audience wants to.
All right. There we
Yeah.
go.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
we can.
Hi,
Hi,
James.
James.
Awesome. Hi guys. Thanks for the awesome presentation. I'm actually an architect assistant working at Grimshaw
Hey.
and writing a research paper on space architecture. So Xavier, this is around the research paper, but I'd like to know, how does the design process we follow as architects change for space?
Yeah, good one. It doesn't. It doesn't at all. I really. So what is really interesting in the difference is, there is a difference though, as everything is more extreme, right?
Okay.
So stuff matters, really matters. For example, when I design a space habitat, I love to have a view. I think it's very important to have a view outside. Great. Same thing with buildings. You want to have windows, right? You want to look outside. Problem with windows, of course, is that you let the sun in and your building will heat up. Same issue you have in Mars. While the sun heating up your building is the sun giving you huge amount of radiation. And so you want to do shading, but you want to do a different type of shading. And funnily enough, I use the same analysis tools that I use for solar radiation on Earth as I do in space. It's you have to kind of tweak it a little bit and all that, but the concept is the same. It's just I'm not going to just heat up the building. I'm going to kill my astronauts if I'm not careful. So it's the same tools often and the same techniques, but the repercussions are much higher, right? For example, another small example, I remember this was in our design process for the Mars habitat. At some point, I got renderings back from our brilliant visualization artists. And what they did in the foreground, they created this kind of, because we use 3D printing robots, they created this kind of boneyard of robots. Because the visualization artists realized, oh yeah, we've printed the whole thing. Where are the robots going to go? They're going here to die on Mars. And I was like, oh my God, I have created the first dump on Mars. This is crazy. I can't do this. So we went back and we completely rejigged our robotic system to make sure this robotic system was usable after the 3D printing process of the Mars habitat. So again, I started to think really hard about sustainability. I started to really think hard about every single bit that we took to Mars had to be used and reused over and over again in different ways. That's why I started working with a fashion designer who makes clothes out of parachutes, Christopher Rayburn. I thought, like, well, that's ideal, right? If we have landing parachutes on Mars, well, why not reuse them for something, right? So I started to rethink, started to work with a furniture designer, Manuel Garcia, who from Nagami, who 3D prints furniture out of recycled plastics. Well, there's going to be loads of packaging material. We better reuse that material to do something else. So yes, I think it's the same ideas, it's the same concept as designing on Earth, but it's not, it's about life and death sometimes in space. And I think that's why I like it, because it just pushes me to do extreme. But the concepts, the way you design and the tools you use is the same.
Okay, thank you, Xavier. Thank you, guys.
Amazing, thank you.
Thanks, James. Great question.
Thank you, James, for your question. So now we have a question for Jane, and this has been sent by Amir Nokia. Amir, do you want to come live and ask your questions? You have sent that to me as well, but it would be great for having you. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Hi, Jane. I'm talking about the habitat part of the title of this webinar, and regarding your experience in Biosphere 2. I'm really bothered by the fact that after Biosphere 2, there was no Biosphere 3 and 4 and 18. It seems like humanity just let this slide, the ability to create a habitat, a real habitat in space. What do you think we can do to push humanity to make this effort, because without this effort, everything we talk about here, but miniaturization or anything, there will be nothing to miniaturize, because we don't understand how to live in space in a way that's sustainable.
There is so much in what you just asked, Amir. So, you know, I think Biosphere 2 was an attempt at being a bioregenerative life support system, right? Where everything recycled inside using life. And what we have discovered since then is that there has been so much advancement in technology for our life support systems that we have to be in space for a pretty long time for bioregenerative systems to really make sense. So whilst we're focused on flying to Leo and even the moon, having a fully bioregenerative system like Biosphere 2 really doesn't make sense unless you're really trying to push the envelope for learning how to live on somewhere like Mars, where you will need that, if not only because you'll need it technically, but you'll also probably need it for the sanity of the people that go. You know, long duration enclosure in spaces that are pure technology is not for everyone. Certainly, the first few that go, they're going to have the mindset to live in a system like that. But once we start thinking about a lot of us going, we are definitely going to need to have a whole lot more life brought into the equation. And I think that, you know, one of the keys here is getting increased excitement about space across the board, and people it goes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning, understanding why it's important. And so one of the things that we're doing, you know, we're really focused on at Space Perspective is being able to take as many people as possible to space. So that's why we're using balloon systems. You know, this isn't taking us to Mars yet. We're really focused on suborbital flight first. But what we're doing is we've created a system that allows so many more people to go because it's very gentle. It is going to be a bit less expensive, and hopefully over time, increasingly less expensive, although it is still going to space. And so what that does for us, we believe, is it really creates a larger and larger group of people who have experienced space. Not just to see images of space, talk about exciting things, watch sci-fi movies, but people who've actually experienced going to space. And I'm pretty certain that's going to start creating a much broader platform upon which we can build the foundations of going to the moon and Mars, and hopefully beyond.
Okay, thanks. That's a great answer.
Amazing. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Amir, for the questions. So now the questions are building up. The next one that I have is from Martina, and she's asking about internship. Martina, do you want to come live? I think this one is going to be for Peter.
Yes, this one is for Peter, actually. Hi, I'm Marta, and I would want to know, how would you recommend young engineers for internships abroad if they don't have experience yet, they graduated in another country? And are your companies open for one?
Well, I think that's a great opportunity because I think internships in different companies, different countries, different projects is the breadth of diversity that we need everybody who's interested in space to have. And, you know, it's not necessarily going to a particular company that is the experience, but it's the particular project and what you get involved with. So I encourage younger students to continue to apply to just about every internship you can, and apply early and often, and pursue them. Not if you don't get it the first time, keep trying, because the projects are out there, that they need talent, the industry needs talent. And if it's not something in the country of your residence, then be open to experiencing it in a different country or a different agency, because that broad breadth of experience is where internationally we need to be very comfortable, all of us, not just in our own home country, but just across the globe. And I encourage internships in any aspect. And it goes back to something somebody else said, if it's not exactly the specific technical genre that you're looking for or expertise, pick one that's close and broaden your horizons. And if it's not pure engineering, it may be social engineering. But all those skills present value in our industry. So continue to pursue it.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Martina.
You're welcome, and good luck. And good luck to you.
Thank you, Peter. So the next question is coming from Diana and is for Michal. Diana, please come on stage.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, okay. Hi. I would really like to ask this because I'm from a kind of a small country where when you want to study something that it's related to science, it's kind of hard to see a bright future or something that it's not being a teacher. Since I'm a kid, people have told me that I have to focus on something specifically. Like, you can't be an athlete, you can be an artist and being a scientist. And I think that's something really sad because I would like to be everything at the same time. I'm sorry, but yes, I want to be an Olympic athlete and I want to be a physicist and go into space, and I want to have my own exhibition at the museum. And I want to know, what do you think? Because everyone says it's impossible and it's immature and childish because you have to choose something. And I'm sorry, but I hate that idea.
Well, I'll
Yeah, we hate it too, all of us.
Really good.
For me also, I always liked to draw when I was younger, and then when I was 16, my parents and my teachers told me, you have to find something that will actually bring you money. Art is not it. So I went and studied computers and business management. And then it hit me that architecture uses both sides of the brain. And then when I wanted to do architecture and diversity, people told me, no, don't talk about it. It's going to scare people away. So I went and talked about it on TED. And I did exactly opposite. And I think right now I'm not just an architect and a space architect. I'm a public speaker. I'm a researcher. I'm an artist. I'm a futurist. I'm many, many things like you said you are. And I think right now the world is really needs people that can do many, many things. It's not only possible, but I think it's very, very important. Back in the day, maybe a few decades ago, it was really like you choose something and you focus on it and that's what you do and you die doing that one specific thing. And I think today you need to be everything, especially as, like Jane said, as an entrepreneur. I mean, you have to know a little bit of business and you have to know how to a little bit of marketing and a little bit of social media and storytelling and public speaking, how to present yourself and how to show what you do. And there's so many aspects that you actually need. So I think not only you can be all those things, I think you really should. And you mentioned that you're from a small country. I think now, especially in this pandemic, this is like your time that everything is online, and this is your time to talk to people from all over the world, go to do like interviews, because you can't really, even if you wanted to, and if you had all the money, you can't really fly and work somewhere else. So this is exactly the time to start making those connections across the world, and the world is really small right now, and I think you should take advantage of that. And good luck.
Well, thank you. I will try. Oh yeah, just by the way, the small country is Costa Rica, just in case you're wondering.
Mm.
That's a beautiful place to be.
Beautiful country.
Thank you, Diana. And thank you, Michal, for the answer, because I totally agree. You know, it happened to me the same, and I thought that Jane was really happy about hearing this experience, because we tend to be boxed in, and if you were an engineer, you can't be a speaker, you can't, you know, be a woman, you can't wear those things, you know, so many things that I keep hearing. You know, if you haven't achieved that thing, you shouldn't be talking about space education, or you shouldn't be that because you have your full-time job already. I'm like, anyway, so these are crazy things that, you know, that everybody will try to fit you into a box. And I think that the examples and the models that you have to look at are actually the ones that don't fit anywhere, that don't fit into any stereotypes, because all of us here had to learn many things, had to learn communication, had to learn how to speak in a virtual stage or on a real stage, had to learn about leadership management and relationships and whatever. So don't really, you know, make those words like it's your destiny. And we have more questions, of course. So now there is a question coming from Thomas, and this is more about a question on system engineering and how we could possibly integrate that, the system engineering as an integration between designing and engineering. So please, Thomas.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for a great talk. It was quite interesting. My question was directed to everybody who has a job right now. Do you feel like you want to call yourself space architect, designer, or system engineer? And which one do you think fits best with the engineering community? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Who would like to answer this difficult question?
Should I answer that one?
Yeah,
Okay,
I see Peter also now. Xavier and Peter, you can share this one, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think I use the terminology architect. I still call myself an architect. I don't actually kind of specify as being a space architect, to be honest. I think system engineering is and for the latest project that we worked on for NASA for the Centennial Challenge, we actually worked with system engineers. So we worked with Cranfield University with our master students there. They were our system engineers for the project, and it was really great working with them. Because we, as an architect, you work in a slightly different way, system engineers work in a slightly different way. And I think finding that sweet spot together and collaborating worked really well. And it was kind of a funny position where it worked really well in our design process as well, because we would able to make decisions that we couldn't have done without using space system engineers. Like some points, we wanted to completely change the construction process, right? Instead of using an inflatable scaffolding and then 3D printing on top of it, we thought, hey, there might be a simpler way. We might just using a heap of regolith as scaffolding and then digging our structure out afterwards. We were like, how long is it going to take? How much energy is it going to take? How much time does it affect our launch date? Because we actually figured all that out. And then we just worked to our system engineers, like, do you think that's possible or not? They went back to all their spreadsheets, came back to us a couple of days later. It's like, yeah, we think it's going to take a year longer. We're like, great, let's do it. So I think there is this kind of really combination possible between system engineers and architects. And for the thing at the Design Museum, what we did, we made two big drawings. One drawing was showing the architecture, and the other drawing was showing the system architecture side by side. And we thought it was really, really important because they're two sides and they're inseparable from each other. And we used an artist and an architect really to then take all the spreadsheets from the system engineers and to communicate them better into more visual language. And that's how we work. So for me, yes, architects are super important. System engineers are there as well, and they should work super close together, I find. Don't know, that's my side of things. Peter might have a different look, or Michal.
Peter, what's your take on system engineering?
So that was a great answer, Xavier. I mean, it was, it takes a village of a complement of skills to do the work in our business, design work, architecture. It takes vision, it takes pragmatic skills, not to mention all the various different disciplines that we have in our line of work. But it takes it all to put the picture together, all the different components, and none the least of which is some of the social aspects of what I refer to as the social engineering aspects of this, because in a general statement, many scientists, engineers, in principle, tend not to be as comfortable as some of us are in speaking, public speaking. And so there's needs to do all of that, because when you have a great project and you want to tell people about it, you have to be able to tell them about it, but you also may need to have the background and the skills to talk to it. So yeah, it takes all of the elements. And I think in composition of teams, in particular at NASA, that's what we look for, is a complete composition of different skills, absolutely different skills, because it's not a singular path anymore.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Thomas, for your question. So we'll now we're approaching to the end of this session. So I will get 2 more questions and then we will wrap this up. So the next one is coming from Stefano, and is about the difference between old space and new space. Stefano, do you want to come on? Yeah, there you go.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Hi, yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your talk. This has been very interesting. And yeah, so the question is related. We've talked about the old space and the new space. And so how do these two inspire a new generation and approach the general public? Is there a substantial difference between the old space and the new space? And maybe let me give a little bit of context to that. Like, you know, the old space, you know, the general perception that the public has of the old space has a massive influence of how fast, right, it can move, right? In the early 90s, we had the faster, better, cheaper that basically told NASA to be faster and do things better and never fail. And I think that the private sector has more of a discount when it comes to failure, and that allows it to take a little bit more risk and move technology at a faster pace. So does that change how the private sector and the new space approaches the general public, and how it inspires the new generation compared to how it is done by the old space?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that would probably take us to the next hour or two to fully answer. But in a minute or two, first of all, thank you for your question, and it's a very astute question. I think one of the most compelling lynch points that I see, again, is linking the benefits of everything that we're doing to achieve a presence in space, in our atmosphere or beyond, and linking it back to a value to ordinary humans on Earth. Why is that important? Why do we spend millions and billions of pick the currency to do this? How does it benefit us on this planet? Is it, are we looking for a new place to live? Have we contaminated our planet enough that we have to go to Mars and live the next generations beyond us? Or what are we learning in the process? And I think that link is what we continue to have to be very mindful of in all of our projects. We have to think about how we convey this to humanity here and how they can relate to it and say, well, you spent 10 billion euro and I get this little widget. This is what we did. Well, it's the journey and how we got there. And we have to be able to explain that and tie it together. And that's where we draw the excitement of continuing to pursue these fabulous discoveries, but also, yeah, we have to make it relatable, because all of these projects, everybody will think, well, we live in this very myopic world where we have a designer and we have a habitat and we have a NASA scientist and an ESA scientist, and it's very convenient. You live in your own world, but that's not the reality. And I think we have to bring it to reality where we talk about how we improve air quality, how we improve travel, how we improve electronics, things that excite the next generation. And if it's your phone, and if we can make a satellite this size and it can do all these amazing things, that might interest a few people. And that might interest a few young engineers to figure out how you get this into space. So, I mean, I don't mean to be flippant about it, but I think that's how we have to latch the two together. Because you're right, old space was thinking about these massive projects and institutional backing, But I think the excitement part now is on the fringes with all the new companies, the new startups, and the new things that are being addressed, the disruptors in the space business. That's where the interesting things are starting to happen. And that's the disruption from old to new. My humble opinion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Stefan, for your question. So I would just like now to collect a couple of questions which are very similar and to wrap this up at the same time. So there were questions about what's the best place for us to get in front of people and get noticed, and for the space industry. And the other one, it's pretty much similar, but it's like a follow-up. How do we get people to mentor us in the moment we need guidance? Considering that obviously any time with, mentoring is something which is very serious, and most of us can't even do that on a regular basis because of all the other commitments. So who wants to answer to the first question? So where do you get in front of people that are part of the space industry, which I think this kind of stage is already the first step. Who wants to take that question?
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
I think that was my biggest challenge and my biggest achievement, I think, in the past few years in the space industry. Unfortunately, there is the information about the space industry is not very organized. It's hard to really know where to go and how to find things. But the first phase is just to start reading and to start learning and to start going to webinars and start understanding the players. For me, when I really got into the industry, I was accepted into this accelerator, and people with my back then startup, and the mentors were from NASA, and Charles Bolden, who was a former NASA administrator, was there, and a lot of amazing people. And I didn't know how to talk to them even, so I didn't sleep at night, and I just read really boring articles just to know the terminology and how to talk to those people. And I think it's a challenge, and a thing you have to work hard on, but they didn't pick up on the fact that I didn't know really, that I didn't have any background in this. But I just started to talk to them. I wasn't shy. I always tried to give them some sort of value from me, and really just learn and ask questions. And I kind of got to know more and more and more people without really asking them for anything in return besides their knowledge. And it got to a point where people are now telling me, oh, I can help you with introducing you to this person, or help you with another project. And I think I heard recently that Mars is a state of mind, or space is a state of mind. And I think the unique thing about the space industry is that most of the people, at least, that are working in the space industry are really excited and passionate about it, and they really want to bring people in. So once you get to know those people, they'll be really happy to help you learn, to help direct you in the right way, to help you introduce, to make introductions to people. So I think really it's something that happens gradually, but you just have to get yourself out there, and you have to not be a wallflower, and you have to talk to people and introduce yourself, and do the work and study and understand what they are talking about to speak their language. And I think I saw a few questions about how we get mentors. I think for me personally, I mean, I would be happy to help anyone with questions, or with projects, or with brainstorming. I have a few mentees that I work with that just approached me after lectures and things like that, and I help them with their own projects. So I think it's a very good industry to find those kind of people, because everyone is like a child looking for aliens kind of in this industry, and they're all really happy to help.
Thank you, Michal. So from Jane and Xavier and Peter, what would be your answer to this one, especially about mentorship and guidance? Because I realize, on a daily basis, you can be inundated by messages, and you can't really have the time or a proper answer in that moment to help that person, that student, to say, okay, well, this is what you could do, this is how you could do it. How do you tackle those, you want to help and they need mentorship, at the same time there is a time barrier for all of us?
So I'm happy to give a bit of a shot. So I try to respond to everything on LinkedIn. So if somebody asks me a question, I try to respond. I generally do. But I can tell you, I really don't respond well when people just say, hey, you're so cool. I just want to get to know you. You know, could you help me? I'm like, I don't even know I don't know what to do with that. What's really helpful is to begin with something a bit specific. It doesn't have to be like the be all and end all of every question you ever wanted to answer or have answered. But certainly an entry point is to try and be a little bit specific. That then is a place I can engage, and I'm happy to engage with that. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Sounds great.
Thank you, Jane. Peter. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. There we go. I have the same response. I mean, we're all busy. We all have lots of things going on, and the pandemic is complicating. I think I too like to, and that's how I met you, through LinkedIn and through the circle of networks that we're creating by these kinds of forums and others, is to continue to nourish the networks that we have. But as you're somebody, I agree with the premise that it's hard to help somebody get into grad school, because that's, how do I get into a doctoral program? Well, that's a very complicated, question. However, I am working on a particular project that has X, Y, and Z, and what do you think I could do? Is there an agency, or is there a headhunter, or that's a different type of question. And I think as you bring those people into your personal network of friends, either through LinkedIn or other social media, stay in contact, go to the same meetings, meet them once, hopefully someday in the future when we actually go to conferences together, let's meet each other, have a coffee. The personal relationship side of this is very important. And now that we're doing it this way, do the best you can. But I think the point was well made by Jane, that just to make it specific. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Xavier, what is your opinion?
Hey, well, the great thing is none of us are in this business for the money, right? So we're in it for the passion. So this makes it a really interesting industry where people are actually quite open and are willing to help. And, so I think that just keep always that in mind, that we're all passionate about what we do. And for that, where we can, we will be helpful. So don't be afraid to kind of approach somebody. And just as last thing I'd say, just believe in your own skill, in what you are good at. I've been in kind of situations where I felt like a complete idiot. I was in a workshop at NASA full of space engineers and space scientists, and I thought, like, I understand half of what I'm doing. Well, everybody is talking about, and then what I did, and I said, Michal, you talked about it. I started drawing, and I'm not even a good drawer. So, but I was able to kind of start communicating and helping in the communication, and that was my role. So just believe in what you're good at, and you'll be able to contribute, and don't be afraid to kind of approach somebody. I would say wherever we can, help will help.
Thank you very much. And it is true. If I can just add something, is that if you just send out, let's say, 20 messages or 100 messages on LinkedIn or Instagram, also because nowadays professionals are approachable on multiple platforms. There is Twitter, there is Instagram, there is Facebook. I've met some of my business partners on Instagram. And this is not even the first or the last time that is going to happen. So if you send out messages to multiple people, you may not have an answer from all of them, but that one person that answers you can actually be the breakthrough that you were looking for. So just keep going. This is what I've done. On a daily basis, maybe I want to know something and I reach out to 20 people and just get one answer, but it's exactly what I was looking for. And also be patient, because I also realized that when I also myself get questions, or could you help me with these, it requires some time. At the same time, when I ask something to people, I know that they may need maybe 1 to 2 weeks to actually answer my question. So that doesn't have to discourage you from sending out messages or requests. And at the same time, just to be specific, just to close this out with something that I read somewhere. So it's like if you are going to a restaurant because you are hungry and you need to hit something out of the menu, you just don't ask the waiter, oh, I'm hungry, I want food. You tell them what you really want. So when you are approaching people, when you are approaching professionals or anybody in the industry, ask exactly what kind of meal do you want? And we may be able to answer your question, because otherwise it's going to be very complicated if it's too generic. And with this one, I want to thank you once again, Michal, Jane, Peter, Xavier, for being with us. It's been extremely valuable, and I've learned a lot myself today. And I'm sure that our audience has taken a lot out of your insights. And again, I want to thank you. Thank the audience for being with us until the very end, for the many questions that they came around, and Adele for being the amazing support she always is in the background. So with this one, I leave you to a good day, a good afternoon, a good night, a good evening, and I'll see you at our next event, Space Spectra number 3. Thank you very much once again, and I'll see you again. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.